conference. So I hope that those who failed to attend our meeting last week, okay, were able to watch the video, the recorded video conference we had as regards the first topic on outcomes-based education. So before we proceed to the continuation of our discussion, may I ask this question? What is the difference between input-based or content-based education and outcomes-based education? Yeah, maybe listen to Princess, please.
Am I audible po?
Yes.
Okay po. Last meeting we discussed about outcome-based education and input-based education. When we say input-based education, as stated before po, there is a scarcity of information. Ngayon po, yung mga teachers, they were expected to, parang everything lies on them po. Parang everything learned must come to them. Tapos yung learner's brain, it is considered tabula rasa or blank slate, and the teachers were expected to fill those blank slates with knowledge. Yun po yung input-based. Bali, yung teachers ang gumagawa ng lahat para may matutunan yung mga students. When we say outcome-based education naman po, dito na pumapasok yung meron na tayong instant sharing of information. Yung learners, hindi lang nagpo-focus sa acquisition of knowledge, but they were also expected to apply this knowledge dun sa future work or after ng formal education, sir. Yun po yung naalala ko.
Okay, I think Princess clearly provided the differences of outcomes-based education and that of input-based education. Also, do not be confused, because input-based education is also called content-based education. Why is it also called as content-based education? Because of the term input, that it's the teachers, okay, it's the teachers providing all the learning contents of the lesson. Okay, that's the input that the teacher is providing. Any additional information as regards input-based and outcomes-based education, aside from what Princess clearly shared in our class?
May I try, sir?
Yes, Teodoro, please, Mark.
Yeah, I agree with Princess. What she provided information about input-based and outcome-based. So for me, just to add on that, when we say input, it is also content. So the teacher mostly provides the content. It's the teacher-centered, so more on content. What would the students ought to learn? It's the information. On the other hand, outcomes-based focus on outcomes, on what should the students do after the learning experience. Something like that. That's my own understanding.
Yeah, I think that is a clear understanding, Mar, of the difference between the two important concepts or two educational models. Now, Mar having said that, content-based education is more on the learning contents being the focus of the instruction, while that of outcomes-based education's focus is more on how students would demonstrate their understanding of the content. Which is which? Which is the focus of input-based education? Is it the breadth or depth of learning? And what is the focus also of outcomes-based education? Is it the breadth or depth of learning? Aside from Mar and Princess to answer the question, anyone who would like to answer the question? Which model or which educational model focuses on the breadth of learning, and which educational model focuses on the depth of learning? We refer from the definition of Mar about input-based and outcomes-based education. Which is for breadth of learning and which is for depth of learning. Alin doon sa modelo ng edukasyon o modelo ng pagtuturo at pagkatuto ang mas focus ay ang lawak ng pagkatuto at alin naman doon sa modelong iyon na ang focus ay yung lalim ng pagkatuto. Yes, Joshua?
Sir, I think so. So input-based education is more in it's no performance based, sir, of the students, and it is more in content mastery. So para sa akin, sir, yung lawak ng yung lawak ng edukasyon, sir?
Lawak ng pagkatuto at
Ano?
lalim ng pagkatuto.
Lawak ng pagkatuto. Sir, for me, yung lawak ng pagkatuto ay sa input-based education.
Okay.
So wherein it is focused more in content, sir, because puro naka-focus lang sa content kahit nawawalan na sila ng oras, sir. Or so more in content sila, sir, kasi yung hello, sir? Sir, hello?
Yes. Yeah, we're listening to you. Hello, Joshua?
Kagaya ng sinabi ko, sir. Sir? Sir, kagaya ng po sinabi ko, sir, input-based education is no performance-based in the students and more in content mastery. Wherein, sir, more in input-based education content yun, sir, kasi
So, Joshua, you're right when you said that input-based education is more on the breadth of learning because it focuses on the content mastery of the students. So it's more on broadening the understanding of the learners as regards the learning content being discussed by the teacher. I agree to that. Okay. How about the depth of learning? Anyone? Yeah, Joshua's right. No. Okay. Remember that the main focus, the primary focus of input-based or content-based education is more on the content mastery. And if it's content mastery, then we're referring merely about the breadth of learning. Okay. How about the depth of learning?
Sir?
Yes, Diane?
Sir, for me kasi yung based on sa alam ko, sir, ang ibig sabihin ng depth of learning is yung topic na which is focuses upon exploring, and so therefore ano po siya, sir, outcome-based education, since outcome-based education is more on giving activities and exploring, yun po.
Okay, and when you give activities and when you allow students to explore, then that would mean that you're giving them the opportunity to even further their understanding about the learning content. Okay, thank you, Diane, for that. Okay, then, with the statements of your classmates, particularly that of Princess, Mar, Joshua, and Diane, it is then clear that outcomes-based education are far different. Outcomes-based education is far different from the input-based education, particularly on how content is being approached, on how learning content is being taught. If it would require students to master skills for them to show how they fully understand a certain concept in class, then that would mean that we are making use of the outcomes-based education model. But if the focus of instruction is more on the delivery of the content or the teaching of the learning content, without even putting focus on how students would be able to transfer their understanding of the content, then that is more on the input-based education. So again, thank you, Princess, Mar, Joshua, and Diane for sharing your good answers to the question as regards the differences between outcomes-based education and that of input-based education. So today we will be continuing our discussion on outcomes-based education by looking into the specific differences of traditional outcomes-based education and that of transformative outcomes-based education. As we have said last meeting, there are still schools making use of traditional outcomes-based education. When we say traditional outcomes-based education, there are still features of the input-based education being used in the traditional outcomes-based education. For example, the use of the use of paper and pencil test. Okay, the use of paper and pencil test is a manifestation that outcomes-based education is used traditionally. But if outcomes-based education make use of portfolio and other authentic assessments, then that would mean that the transformative outcomes-based education is being employed as an educational model. Okay, so allow me to share the presentation. Okay, we will now proceed to the transformational OBE. We already have started this last meeting. Okay, and we said that the father of OBE is no other than Dr. William Spady. Spady said that success in school is of limited benefit unless students are equipped to transfer that success to life in a complex, challenging, high-tech future. Ito yung sasabi natin na transformational OBE, traditional OBE makes use of learning outcomes, but okay, the outcomes are being measured, most of these outcomes are being measured by merely the use of paper and pencil tests. Okay, but for transformational OBE, learning outcomes are being measured through using authentic forms of assessment. Later on, we will be discussing about the authentic forms of assessment, performance-based assessment, product-based assessment, okay, to measure achievement of learning outcome. Because it is through these types of assessment that teachers or schools could easily check whether students can be able to transfer or apply what they have learned in a complex, challenging situations or circumstances. Now, a traditional transformational OBE is outcome defined, not calendar defined. What do we mean by this? That the focus of transformational OBE is on the achievement of outcome. That no matter how long the discussion would be, no matter how long the activities would be in class, as long as these activities would help learners achieve the outcome, then that will certainly be done. And unlike in a traditional OBE that it's calendar defined, when we say calendar defined, okay, you have to meet the required time that you are supposed to discuss the lesson or the learning content. That you have to strictly follow the syllabus as it is as the activities are clearly articulated in the syllabus. You really have to follow those. Okay, so for you to be able to complete the teaching and learning process. But what completes the teaching and learning process in the transformational OBE is the achievement of learning outcome. Second one, transformational OBE is expanded in opportunity, not constrained. What makes traditional OBE constrained? Because you just have to merely apply, you just have to merely do what is being articulated in the lesson plan or in the learning plan in traditional OBE. But for transformational OBE, if there are even more opportunities so that the students would further their understanding about the learning content, even if these activities are not articulated in the syllabus or even in the lesson plan, then you have to do it to provide more opportunities for learners to expand, to further, to deepen their opportunity to learn about the learning content. Kaya nga, di ba, sa transformational OBE, yung assignment na natawag natin is no longer called as an assignment, but enrichment activity. Because the activity has to enrich. Pag sabi mo enrich, mayaman na siya, pero lalong pong pagyamanin yung natutunan ng mga mag-aaral sa klase through these enrichment activities. It is based on performance credentialing and not custodial. There were, in a traditional outcomes-based education, teachers would always be there to tell students what to do and what they are not supposed to do. That is what we mean by custodial. But for transformational OBE, which is based on performance credentialing, it's more on the output that matters. If the performance has been well performed, if the performance has been well exemplified, or has been well shown, then that measures real learning. Ito kasi sa traditional, if you follow the procedure, okay, if you follow the procedure very well, without question of the procedure, then that would measure how you are learning from class. But that's not the real measure of learning according to transformational OBE practitioners. For them, it's on how you perform. It's on how you actually apply what you have learned into new contexts or into new situations or circumstances. Next, transformational OBE aided by instructional coaching. Okay, and not tied to curriculum coverage. Kaya sasabi natin noon na ang traditional OBE is more on the target of traditional OBE is more on the completion of the curriculum as it's clearly stated in the syllabus. But for transformational OBE, it's more on how you are to coach learners, on how you facilitate learning among your students. Okay, you are just there. Okay, the teacher would just be there to inspire students to learn more and not to dictate what students are supposed to learn. Next is transformational OBE is integrated in concepts, not segmented in content. Remember that in our old basic education curriculum, subjects are fragmented. Kaya kung makikita ninyo, merong separate sa science, for example, science. When you were in grade 7, you have this when we were in grade 7, because you didn't reach this already. We were the last batch of the old curriculum for DepEd. Grade 7 is our earth science. Grade 8 is our biology. Grade 9 is our chemistry. Grade 10 is our physics. So if you observe, it's fragmented because the subjects are being segmented or fragmented because the subjects are being distributed across different levels, across the different levels. But in the K-12 curriculum, okay, K-12 is an outcomes-based curriculum, no? In a K-12 curriculum, you would see the progress, no? There's build-up, there's progress of the subjects. Kaya nga tinatawag niyang spiral progression. Because science, the things that you discuss in Science 1 will be the same thing that will be discussed in Science 2, only that, okay, it will level up to another degree. Kapag third year ka na, magle-level up pa yun. Tapos pag nasa fourth year ka na, mas lalo magle-level up yung content na tatalakayin tungkol dun sa konseptong iyon. That's what we mean by spiral progression, which is a manifestation of outcomes-based or transformational outcomes-based education. It's integrated because integrated ang tawag sa kanya dahil habang tumataas ang antas mo sa pag-aaral, ay lalo na paglalalim, lalo na paglalawak ang mga konseptong tinalakay nung mga nakaraang level o nakaraang antas. Transformational OBE is based on culminating achievement, not on cumulative achievement. What do you mean culminating achievement? It's on how will you be able to create something new out from scarce resources. Okay, that's what we mean by culminating achievement. Kaya nga ang pinaka-culmination ng learning mo is your ability to perform, your ability to demonstrate, your ability to transfer learning. Kaya kung makikita nyo sa K-12, meron tayong tinatawag na GRASP, no? The GRASP model is already the culmination of student learning. Pag cumulative achievement kasi, di mo malala ninyo, meron yung grading first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter. Sino ginagawa pa rin yun? That's cumulative achievement. O di kaya, pag sabi cumulative, nakakaapekto yung isa sa St. Louis. We are still making use of we are still making use of traditional outcomes-based education. Why? Because when we say because of this characteristic that we do cumulative achievement. Ano ibig sabihin cumulative achievement? Yung makaka-apekto pa rin yung performance mo, yung previous performance mo dun sa bago mong performance. Kaya nga, di ba, cumulative siya because 30% of your grade, for example, for finals, your final grade is 30% of your midterm raw score plus 70% of your final raw score. That's what we mean by cumulative. Merong epekto yung previous performance mo. But for outcomes-based education, it will culminate through a performance, through a transfer of learning performance. Okay, sabit lang. Okay. Now, the next one is Transformational OBE is oriented to inclusionary success, not selection-oriented. What do we mean by this? Ito yung sabi natin, that outcomes-based education has, the transformational outcomes-based education has to make use of varied strategies, varied resources to address the different needs of diverse learners. That makes it inclusionary. Okay? It's not just the activities are not just for the gifted students. The activities are not just for slow learners or resource learners. The activities are not just those who are culturally challenged individuals. Okay? But activities are being differentiated to make sure that it target all types of learners inside the classroom. Outcomes-based, transformational outcomes-based education is characterized by cooperative learning, not by contest learning. Okay, di ba remember, when we were kids, no, if I do not know if you experienced this, if your teachers, will arrange, after checking the paper, the teacher will arrange the papers from the highest scorer to the lowest scorer. Then tatawagin niya, pabibigay niya yung papel according to the arrangement. So mahalata mo na kung sino yung highest, sino yung mababang score, sino yung bagsak. But that is not supposed to be done in a transformational outcomes-based model. Okay? It has to be characterized by cooperative learning. That learning has to promote collaboration from among learners. Ayun yung sinasabi niya. Because two heads are better than one. Remember that. Okay, di ba maalala niyo noon na activities ay puro na lang individual activities tapos kinukumpara pa yung score mo din sa classmate mo. But in outcomes, transformational outcomes-based education, it's more on how you work with people, how you work with your classmates. Next, confirmed by criterion validation not dependent on comparative evaluation. Ito yung tawag natin na norm-oriented and I forgot the other term. Criterion reference, norm reference and criterion reference, validation or evaluation. Pag sinabi mong criterion reference, okay, ito yung pag sinabi mong norm reference, you're comparing the performance of a student to another student. Kaya nga nagkakaroon ng contest pag sabi mong traditional outcomes-based education. But for transformational outcomes-based education, it's more on your performance. It's more on the criteria. What the criteria being set is the ultimate reference of your performance. It's not the performance of your classmate. It's not the performance of the other students in class, but it's your performance as a learner. That's what we mean by criterion validation. Transformational Obe is formed on collaborative structures, not composed of cellular structures. So remember that. Okay, that transformational Obe is more of letting students, work in teams so that they could be able to learn something. Okay, that's what we mean by collaborative structure. Okay. Now, before we continue our discussion on outcomes of education and outcomes of OBE, we open the floor for question and answer. Okay, open natin for question and answer. Anyone?
Sir?
Yes, Dayan.
Sir, pwede po paki-clarify po ano po kasi medyo hindi ko po maintindihan kung paano po yung spiral approach.
Yeah, the spiral progression approach is like this. Yung maalala nyo yung sa time namin noon, the basic education curriculum, that was 2010, RBEC, Restructured Basic Education Curriculum. What we have done is for example, for grade 1, we do pagsasoksay. We do civics. Okay, for grade 1. Grade 2, another civics lesson. Grade 3 is another civics. Grade 4, meron ng geografiya at kasaysayan. Grade 5, meron ng kasaysayan. Geografiya ba? Okay. Geografiya at kasaysayan pa rin, pati sibika. Grade 6, geografiya, kasaysayan, sibika. So, it's fragmented. It's segmented. Ang ibig sabihin, magkakaibang para-parehas sa social sciences pero nahati-hati siya, okay? Nahati-hati siya according to the discipline. Okay, that's fragmented or segmented. Similarly with science, di ba? Halimbawa sa science, first year high school is earth science, second year high school is biology, third year high school is chemistry, fourth year high school is physics. Okay. But in the K-12, okay, it's already integrated in approach. And when we say integrated in approach, yung mga different disciplines na ito ay tatalakayin ng sabay-sabay, okay, sa para-parehas na antas. Okay, sa para-parehas sa grade level. Halimbawa, ang science, for example, ang science 1, hindi na siya earth science, kundi science 1, science 7, science 7, science 8, science 9, science 10. Okay. Ibig sabihin, ginawa siyang science to include all branches of science to be discussed in that grade level. Na habang tumataas ka ng antas, lumalalim din yung pamamaraan kung paano itinuturo ng guro yung nasabing subject, yung nasabing kurso. Okay, that's what we mean by spiral progression. So habang umaakyat ka ng antas, lalong lumalawak at lalong lumalalim yung approach ng teacher para talakayin yung content, yung nilalamang pagkatuto sa bawat antas. Pero the same subject na science. Okay, yun yung pinagkaiba, yun yung tatawag nating spiral progression. Okay, it's more of the approach being, it's more on the content being enriched, not on the subject being taught. Okay, yung pinagkaiba. Pag sabi natin subject, it's a discipline. Pag sinabi natin content, it's the learning content, it's the content or the theory being discussed in the said discipline. Okay, so yung pinagkaiba niya, Dayan. So, habang tumataas ang antas mo, lalong lumalalim yung approach kung paano tatalakayin ng guro, kung paano yung mapapagawa ng guro para lalong maunawaan at lalong mapagyaman ng estudyante yung kanyang pag-unawa dun sa content. So, ibig sabihin, kung discuss sa inyo ang flower halimbawa ng grade 1, tatalakayin pa rin ang flower ng grade 2. Yun nga lang, lalong lalaliman yung pagkakatalakay ng flower. Kung may flower ng grade 2, may flower pa rin ng grade 3, pero mas malalim siya kumpara kay grade 2. Kapag tatalakay si flower sa grade 4, mas malalim naman ang pagkakatalakay niya kumpara sa pagkakatalakay niya dun sa grade 3 o grade 4. So that's what we mean by spiral progression. Di ba pag spiral, ganyan, no? Spiral, tama? Spiral. So habang kapag nasa umpisa pa lang niya, hindi ganun kalawak pero hindi rin ganun kalalim. Pero habang tumatagal, lumalawak at lumalalim yung pagkakaatake o pagkakatalakay ng nasabing konsepto. That is what we mean by spiral progression. And that is outcomes-based education. Okay, Dayan?
Yes po, sir.
Okay. So any more question? Thank you, Dayan, for clarifying that out. Kaya yung nangyari, no? Kaya kung mapansin niyo nung 'di ba kayo ay produkto ng K-12, no? Tama?
Yes, sir.
Kung makikita ninyo,
Yes, sir.
minsan may problema dun sa pagkakatalakay kasi parang feeling niya po ulit-ulit, tama?
Yes po.
Parang
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
parang paulit-ulit yung content. Pero ang problema doon kasi, walang sapat na training ang guro. Nung implement ang K-12, walang sapat na training ang mga guro kung paano dapat gawin yung spiral progression. Kasi, yung mga guro naman natin noon, yung mga guro naman ninyo noon, ang kanilang training ay fragmented. Kasi hindi pa nabago yung teacher preparation, hindi pa nabago yung nilalaman ng tinuturo sa kolehiyo, lalo na sa mga kumukuha ng teacher education course, teacher education program. Kaya gulat na gulat sila nung i-implement ang K-12. Kaya parang feeling nyo paulit-ulit na lang yung lesson. Feeling nyo naging paulit-ulit siya kasi hindi naman napalalim ng guro yung talakayan, yung pagkakatalakay niya doon sa nilalamang pagkatuto. So yun ang naging problema. Yun ang naging challenge ng K-12. But actually in USA, K-12 spiral progression is really working. Okay? Kasi merong sapat na training yung mga teachers kung paano laliman yung atake nila doon sa pagkakatalakay ng nilalamang pagkatuto. But in the Philippines talagang kulang tayo ng training sa mga teachers kung paano talaga gawin ng tama yung spiral progression. Kasi nasanay talaga tayo sa fragmented approach na parang, pag science, earth science lang, chemistry lang, physics lang. Pero nangyari na dito sa K-12, talagang pinagsama-sama lahat ng discipline, okay? Natatalakayin per grade level. Pero, ang pinag-iba lang yung atake niya kung paano laliman ng guro yung pagkakatalakay. Okay? Any more question? Okay. If there are no more questions, so we continue our discussion. So we proceed to outcomes of education. Because later on, I'll discuss to you your activity for this week. Okay, now we proceed to outcomes of education. As we have said then, OBE focuses classroom instruction on the skills and competencies that students must exemplify when they exit formal education. So it's really preparing our learners for the world of work, preparing our learners to be adaptable, to be flexible after finishing or after exiting formal education. These skills and competencies make up the outcomes of education. So the skills and competencies are what we mean by outcomes of education, because this has to be our target. Why should we be educated? Why should we have to enter the formal education? Because we would be learning different skills and different competencies. And these are the outcomes of education. Bunga ng edukasyon ay upang malinang ang ating kakayanan at ang ating mga kalinangan. Okay, competence, kakayahan, skills, competencies ay kalinangan. Okay, there are two types of outcomes. Okay, remember this. We have the immediate and deferred outcomes. I have read your answers in the learning conversation tasks. Okay, and I think most of you clearly differentiated immediate outcomes from deferred outcomes. So when we say immediate outcomes, they refer to competencies or skills attained upon completion of an instruction, a subject, a grade level, a segment of a program, or a program itself. These are also termed as instructional outcomes. Example include the following: your analytic ability, your problem-solving skill, your ability to communicate, skill in creative expression, technological skills. These are examples of immediate outcomes. So any outcome or skills that you have achieved upon completing, for example, Edu 1093, upon completing second year na ba kayo? Third year.
Third year, sir.
Okay. Upon completing third year in college, upon completing a certain program, okay, for example, a review program and others, these are what we mean by immediate outcomes. Okay. So, the immediate outcomes, okay, the competencies or skills that you attain may include analytic ability, your ability to evaluate things out, okay, and to identify problems and to identify solutions for these problems, analytic ability, problem-solving skills, the ability to solve or use the solution to solve a certain problem, ability to communicate in writing, reading, speaking, mathematically, and your skill in creative expression and technological skills. These are all examples of competencies that may be attained after completing a subject, a grade level, or a segment, or a program. These are what we mean by immediate outcomes. So, ibig sabihin, yung mga sinabi ko sa inyo na course learning outcomes in Edu 1093, these are all examples of immediate outcomes. Okay? Halimbawa po ito ng immediate outcomes. How about deferred outcomes? Deferred outcomes pertain to the ability to apply cognitive, psychomotor, and affective skills competencies in various circumstances many years after completion of a degree or a program. Okay, examples of these are, for example, promotion in job position rank as evidence of work competence, skill, and social relation. Halimbawa, after you graduate in USL, okay, after you graduate in USL, nagturo ka sa private school. Ngayon, out from your experience in the private school, nag-apply ka sa public school. After 1 year of teaching in public school, na-promote ka as, for example, as teacher 2, teacher 3, and others. And promotion may mean that you have actually met the competency or skill that let you achieve such promotion. That is what we mean by deferred outcome. Another, success in professional practice or occupation as evidence in skill and career planning, health service, and continuing education. For example, out from your experience as a teacher for 14 years, for example, okay, you were able to, continuing education is, you took up, for example, success in professional practice, you took up your master's degree, then after that, your doctor's degree, you finish all these things, then that is what we mean by deferred outcomes. Okay? Because you exemplified lifelong learning. Awards and recognitions. Awardan ka halimbawa one of the 10 outstanding teacher by Metrobank, or you were awarded as outstanding teacher in the region. Okay, and others. So all these things are examples of deferred outcomes. You met all these things, you were able to do all these things because you have manifested the competence and skills related to such promotion, to such continuing education, and to such awards and recognition. So meaning to say, the graduate attributes of the University of St. Louis, if you are to achieve those, exemplify those many years after finishing your degree in the university, then these are what we mean by deferred outcomes. Okay? Maliwanag po ba yung pagkakaiba ng dalawa? Maliwanag po ba?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. Now we continue. How about outcomes in OBE? Okay. What will be outcomes in OBE? When we are to make use of the outcomes-based education model, okay, what will be the result of OBE? That's what we mean by outcomes in OBE. Outcomes in OBE are attributes that a graduate of an institution is deemed to demonstrate 3 or more than 3 years after graduation. Okay, ulitin natin, no? Sabi natin kanina, deferred outcome. Okay, deferred outcomes. Ito yung deferred outcomes tinatawag natin, yung promotion in job, success, and awards and recognitions. But you were able to have the promotion, to have the continuing education, to have the awards and recognition because, for example, you were able to, ito yung next, you were able to meet or demonstrate, okay, the outcomes in OBE, which is the demonstration of the graduate attributes. Okay. These outcomes come at various levels: institutional program, course, and learning or instructional lesson. So ito yung tatlong outcomes in OBE. So paggagawa ka ng outcomes-based education in your educational model, kailangan gagawa ka ng institutional outcome, gawa ka ng program outcome, gawa ka ng course outcome. Ay, ano ibig sabihin ng institutional outcome? Yung St. Louis, yung graduate attribute. Program outcome. What is the program outcome of Bachelor of Secondary Education, of Bachelor in Physical Education? Now, out from the program, gawa ka na ngayon ng course outcome. For example, may subject under BPED, ano ba, under wala kang, under SOCSI, meron kayong subject na geography. Then yung course learning outcomes about geography is an example of course learning outcome. Okay? Now, diniscuss na natin ito. These are the graduate attributes of USL. Now, out from the graduate attributes, gumawa tayo ng institutional learning outcomes. Ito yung mga institutional learning outcomes. Practice Christian values in both professional and personal endeavors in the service of the church and country and for advancement of the CICM mission. Apply the latest development in the specific field of practice to meet the current and emerging needs of society. Communicate effectively in oral and written English and Filipino and with working knowledge and skills in at least one foreign language. Act in accordance with professional, social, and ethical standards and others. So ito po yung mga halimbawa ng institutional learning outcomes. Okay? Okay. Now, we proceed now to, okay, dahil meron kayong activity, no, by pair activity, you are going to do the activity by pair. Ang gagawin ninyo ay, gagawa kayo ng sample learning outcome, okay, base sa objective, educational objective. Last meeting, we made mention of the difference between objective and that of learning outcome. When we say objective, it is written in the teacher's perspective. When we say learning outcome, it's written in the student perspective or learner's perspective. So kumbaga ang objective ay yung gagawin ng guro kapag tatalakayin niya yung nasabing unit. Kapag sabi naman nating learning outcome, ito yung gagawin ng estudyante para maipakita niya yung resulta ng pagtuturo ng kanyang guro. Okay, that's what we mean by the difference between objective and learning outcome.
Sir, may tanong po ako.
Yes, Jennifer?
Sir, dito po sa learning outcomes. Okay, ko. Sir, dito po ba sa learning, sa outcome is kahit affective and psychomotor lang po yung meron or kailangan po na yung tatlong domain?
Yeah, ideally, the three domains of learning, okay, should be present. Pero there are some subjects which would challenge us on how to craft learning outcomes, particularly under affective domain. But later on, ito kasi pauna pa lang to, Jennifer. But later on, I'll be teaching you on how to make use of the three domains of learning so that it would still be complete when you craft learning outcomes for each unit of study. Okay, kasi marami namang levels yun. Ang hindi lang kasi natin alam is parang ang naging problema sa mga teachers ngayon is nahihirapan sila to craft or to write learning outcomes for each domain of learning because they are not that well equipped of the appropriate verbs or appropriate action verbs that has to be used. Okay, appropriate action verbs that have to be used, should I say, in designing learning outcomes. Later on, I'll discuss that, the different domains and how to do it. Pero, yung sabi ko nga, ideally, okay, kailangan. Pero, may mga subject kasi, may mga paksa kasi, may mga aralin kasi na mahirap makapaglagay ng mga bunga ng pagkatuto na naangkop sa apektibo, okay, na naangkop sa kognitibo at psychomotor na level. Okay, so anyway, titignan natin yan as we progress in our discussion in Edu 1093. Okay, thank you, Jennifer, for that question.
Sige po, sir.
How about the others? Kaya yung marami nagkamali doon sa sagot ninyo doon sa learning conversation. Doon sa may last part, yung sa last part na yung sa technological, allow me to yung sa mero o doon sa difference between to develop technological skills, and to create an infographic explaining a select social issue. Take note that I didn't ask you to explain the two. Paano ibig sabihin ng dalawa? But to differentiate the two. Yung to develop technological skills is an example of educational objective. Okay? While to create an infographic explaining a select social issue is an example of learning outcome. Why? The teacher would develop the technological skills of the students. That's your purpose as a teacher. Because that is what you are supposed to develop among your learners. And how will I be able to meet that objective? I'll ask my students to create an infographic, because when you ask them to create an infographic, then that would mean that they are exercising their ability when it comes to the use of technology. So yun yung pinagkaiba ng dalawa. To develop a technological skill is educational objective. To create an infographic is an example of learning outcome. Okay, and
Sir?
Yes. Who's that?
Sir Joshua, sir.
Yeah, Joshua, please. Joshua, pakita mo yung VA, put on your camera, please.
Sir.
Okay, yes, Joshua.
Sir, for clarification lang, sir. Sir, yung immediate outcome in deferred outcome, is that under about OBE ba, sir? O magkaiba sila, sir?
Yeah. Yung deferred outcome and immediate outcomes may still be under outcomes-based education. Okay? It can still fall under outcomes-based education. Pero ginawa natin siyang outcomes in education because certainly these are things that we would like, these are the results, okay, that we would like to see in our learners after exiting the formal education. Okay, kaya kung makikita ninyo, si deferred outcome ay kakailanganin pa rin niya yung graduate attributes. Kakailanganin pa rin niya yung outcomes in OBE. Even yung immediate outcomes, nandun siya, makaklasify siya under doon sa program outcome, program learning outcome, and that of the course learning outcome or learning outcome. Okay, so klaruhin natin yon. Outcomes in education would mean the result. Okay, what we would like to see as a result, okay, what we would like to see among our students as a result of their formal education. And these outcomes in education may be an immediate outcome or a deferred outcome. Deferred outcome may happen or may be achieved if we consider the use of outcomes-based education, particularly in clarifying our graduate attributes and designing or crafting our institutional learning outcomes. Okay. Immediate outcomes may be attained as a result of formal education if in our outcomes-based education practice, we devise or we craft our program learning outcomes and our course learning outcomes. Okay, klaro, Joshua? Joshua?
Yes, sir. Yes po, sir.
Okay, good. Okay, klaro ho ba lahat? Thank you, Joshua, for asking that question so that it would be clear to everyone in class. Joshua, what is your major?
Mathematics, sir.
Teka lang, anong major math? Okay, so we have a mix of math. Soksay, no? Princess, you're Soksay, di ba? And Mora?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay, Soksay.
Sir?
Math, Soksay, and ED, tama? Math, Soksay, and elementary education ba to? Yeah, we have Dian. Dian is an elementary BEd student, no? Dian?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, malinaw po yun ha. Malinaw po yung pinagkaiba ni outcomes in education and outcomes in OBE. Okay.
Meron?
So, yes, Corona. Bernadette?
Pwede ba magtanong?
Yes, no problem.
Yung sa may ano kasi, yung explain mo nga po kanina dun sa technological skills and creating infographic. So, ayun, yung technological skills po, yung parang tuturuan mo yung estudyante po na ano, sa mga skills ng
Oo,
tap.
tama. Kung paano gumamit ng, kung paano the purpose or objective as a teacher is to train learners on how to make use of technology appropriately. Okay, so that is your educational objective. Now, what will you ask your learners do so that they will really be trained on technological skills? Then you ask them, an example is you ask them to design an infographic about the learning content you discuss to them. So, kapag gagawa sila infographic, they are actually making use of their technological skills. Kung sakaling hindi maganda yung infographic nila, kung sakaling maganda naman yung infographic nila, then this will serve as this will provide a message that you need to provide more opportunities for them to develop kapag pangit yung infographic, or you provide them more opportunities to expand kasi maganda yung kanilang pinakitang infographic. Okay? For example, another example. My objective, for example, in class is to develop or develop ICT skills of my learners. And what will I ask my learners do so that they could be able to demonstrate their ICT skill? Okay, information, communication, and technology skill. I'll ask them to prepare, for example, a pecha kucha. When we say a pecha kucha, it's a PowerPoint presentation. It's a presentation. It's a PowerPoint presentation, but there should only be 20 slides. Okay, 20 slides and 20 seconds to discuss the content of each slide. Okay, recorded siya. So then they have to present that in class. Then that is an activity that students would be doing to show their ICT skill. So this would tell us that educational objective has to be written in the teacher's perspective and learning outcome has to be written in the learner's perspective. Bernadette?
Okay na po. Thank you.
Okay, sige. The question of Bernadette will certainly help you out later in the activity that you will be doing for this week. Okay, any more question? Welcome, Bernadette. Thank you for asking.
Ako po, sir.
Yes, Devin.
Sir, nagigets ko po yung pinagkaibahan ng dalawa. Pero example din po ba ng immediate and deferred po yung sa question 7 na yun, sir?
Ano yung sa?
Yung technological po tapos yung infographic po, sir, is example din po ba ng deferred and
Yeah.
immediate, sir?
Yung design and infographic is an example of an immediate. Okay? It's an example of immediate outcome. Okay? Hindi siya pwedeng sabihin na deferred outcome, hindi siya pwedeng matawag na deferred outcome because deferred outcome may only be achieved many years or after several years after exiting the formal education. Dahil tatawag natin mga awards mo, dahil may pamalas mo ito, that is what we mean by deferred outcome.
Yes po, sir.
Okay? So, halimbawa, syempre wala akong ibang may example, no? Halimbawa, ganito. When I finished my degree in the University of St. Louis, for example, a social studies major. Okay, as a social studies major. So, nagturo ako, okay? Kunwaring ginalingan ko ang aking pagtuturo, okay? At dahil ginalingan ko ang aking pagtuturo bilang isang guro, bilang isang social studies instructor or professional education instructor, I was promoted after 3 years, for example. I was promoted as the academic extension coordinator of SEA sa Halimbawa. Okay, halimbawa yun. My promotion, because I have shown these competencies as a teacher, as a social studies teacher, my promotion as an academic extension coordinator is an example of deferred outcome. Because that's what we the outcomes in education, no? Because that took place 3 years after, okay, my graduation in the university. That's an example of deferred outcome. Okay. Ngayon, inayos ko yung trabaho ko as academic extension coordinator. Then after a year, I was promoted as the director for community extension and services. That promotion is an example of deferred outcome kasi nangyari siya several years after exiting the formal education. Okay. Earning my master's degree, for example, that is an example of deferred outcome kasi natapos ko. Okay, hindi lang ako nakontento doon sa undergraduate ko, pero nag-aral pa ako kahit matagal ng aking master's degree. That is deferred outcome. Okay? Maliwanag ho ba, Daryl? Daryl?
Yes po, sir.
Okay, good. Okay, thank you. I really like that you're asking questions because that will certainly help you later. Okay, so that you would get a good score, you would earn a good score in the activity. Okay? Kasi later on sa quiz ninyo, tatanungin tong mga ito, yung pinagkakaiba ng mga ito. Okay, so maliwanag yun ha, yung design and infographic is an example of immediate outcome because it's a program learning outcome. So meaning to say, all program learning outcomes, course learning outcomes, these are all examples of immediate outcomes. All institutional learning outcomes, graduate attributes, these are all examples, achievement of all of these are examples of deferred outcome. Okay, klaro?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. Any more question? Yes, Rendon, Christina?
Sir,
Yes.
ang immediate outcome po ba is pwedeng maging deferred outcome po?
Ang immediate outcome ho ba, sir, ay pwede maging deferred outcome. It's contributory towards the achievement of the deferred outcome. Pero hindi siya pwedeng maging deferred outcome. But it would certainly be contributory towards the achievement of the deferred outcome. Kaya nga, di ba doon sa, maalala mo yung gear, yung pinakita natin kanina, yung 3 gears, tama? Yung 3 gears, kailangan magkakakonect yung mga iyon. So, kumbaga, pag nakagawa ka na ng graduate attributes mo at ng institutional learning outcomes mo, dapat kapag gawin mo yung program learning outcomes mo, nakaangkla pa rin siya doon sa iyong institutional learning outcome. Tapos yung course learning outcomes mo sa bawat subject ay dapat nakaangkla siya doon sa program learning outcome. Yung mga learning outcomes mo when you discuss each of the lesson under each subject, nakaangkla din dapat siya doon sa course learning outcome. So, ibig sabihin, the immediate outcomes are contributory towards the attainment of the deferred outcomes. Ito yung tatawag natin magkakaugnay lahat. Okay? Pero hindi pwedeng sabihin na si deferred outcome, si course learning outcome ay pwede siyang tawaging deferred outcome. No, hindi pwedeng sabihin iyon. But they are contributory towards the attainment of the deferred outcome. Parang ganito, pag nag-aral ako na maayos, na-meet ko yung mga course learning outcomes ko sa klase, nag-aral ako pinakita ko ang mga competencies na ito, okay? Ipinakita ko ang mga graduate attributes na in-expect sa akin ng St. Louis. At dahil naipakita ko lahat ng mga ito, na-promote ako sa trabaho ko, naipakita ko mga ito na awardan ako ng, for example, ng ganitong award as a teacher, then these outcomes now contributed towards the deferred outcome, towards the attainment of the deferred outcome. Okay, Christina?
Yes.
So, sir, ibig sabihin is
Yes, Jennifer?
these are the expected results na makikita na sa mga students?
Yes. Expected results. Ibig sabihin, ito yung nais mong makita, ito yung nais mong maipamalas ng iyong mga mag-aaral pagkatapos mong ituro sa kanila ang subject, o di kaya pagkatapos silang makuha yung program, yung degree, o di kaya pagkatapos silang mag-aral sa USL. Okay? Kaya nga tinawag na outcomes-based. Okay? Yung effect na gusto mong makita sa kanila, yung pagbabago na gusto mong makita sa kanila. And we have to articulate that ahead of time. Kaya tinatawag natin OBE, o Schools Control Success, when they make use of the OBE educational model. Kasi talagang malinaw yung lahat ng outcomes na gusto natin makita sa ating mga estudyante. Okay?
Hello.
Yes, Mar?
Well, I'm just listening to the conversation a while ago. I realized that this outcomes-based education is sobrang broad siya, and yung success ng student, hindi mo lang makikita kapag natapos na yung subject in the future. Thank you.
Correct. Kaya nga alam mo, Mar, tama yan yung realization mo. Kaya sasabi natin, no, minsan ang kagalingan ng estudyante ay hindi nasusukat kung nakapagtapos siya ng cum laude o nakapagtapos na merong Latin Award. Okay, usually makikita mo yan several years after finishing a degree in the school. Okay? Kaya kung makikita mo, no, yung mga graduates ng St. Louis halimbawa, kung titignan mo, mas maraming mga successful na hindi naman top-notcher. Mas maraming successful na hindi naman Latin awardee. Okay, ito yung mga usual, yung parang usual students lang. Okay, na nakokontento na may pasa niya, nakokontento niya na makapag-aral siya and others. So ibig sabihin, wala talagang ultimate measure ng success. Ultimate measure ng achievement of the result or outcomes of education. Okay, thank you, Mar, for that very good realization. Talagang kaya nga nung nagsimula ang outcomes-based education, talagang hirap lahat ng eskwelahan kung paano i-implement ang outcomes-based education. Kasi talagang napakalawak ng sakop niya. Okay? Hindi lang malawak, no, malalim ang approach niya para na sa ganoon ay maisagawa siya, may sakatuparan siya ng epektibo sa iba't ibang sistemang pang-edukasyon. Okay? So, if there are no more questions, allow me to explain to you your tasks for this week. Okay na ba? Okay, sige. Share screen. Okay, so this is your task. You're going to write learning outcomes, okay, from the given okay, so this one, you have to download the attached worksheet. Ito. Work in pairs to write a learning outcome for each of the given educational objectives. Please note that only one from you has to submit your completed worksheet through the Dropbox. So this is a Dropbox assessment. Allow me to show to you, okay, the worksheet. So kayo nang pipili ng ka-pairmate ninyo ha, ng kaparehas ninyo. Okay, so this is the worksheet. So, the following are educational objectives for the subject elementary science, K-12. Formulate 2 learning outcomes for each educational objective. Below is the rubric. So content, all learning outcomes are correctly formulated. That's 12 points. Miscellaneous, all formulated learning outcomes are free from grammatical and spelling errors. Sorry, I forgot to include spelling errors. 8 points. Okay. So ito. The educational objective, for example, is to provide instruction that will enable learners to understand their immediate physical environment by using their senses, questioning, sharing ideas, and identifying simple cause and effect relationship. So this is the objective of the teacher. Now, what will you ask your students do? Okay, to meet this, what will you ask your students do? Okay, in line with this educational objective. Okay, number 2 is a psychomotor objective, to equip the learners with the skill to conduct guided investigation by following a series of steps that includes making and testing predictions, collecting and recording data, discovering patterns, and suggesting possible explanations. This is psychomotor objective. You draft 2 learning outcomes. Under affective, to encourage among students a deep understanding and appreciation of the differences of the plant and animal groups found in their locality, then you provide learning outcomes under affective. Okay? So, klaro ho ba ang task ninyo? Klaro, guys? Or any clarification? I request everyone to please turn on your camera. Any clarification as regards to the task? Thank you, Mar, for responding. Laging si Mar ang unang nagre-respond. Siguro sobrang lakas ng internet niya sa kanila. Mar, malakas ba ang internet dyan? Okay, para makita ko naman kayo.
Nope, I'm using my data.
Data ka lang. Hindi ko nakikita masyado yung mamukha ng iba. Okay, sige. Any question as regards
Sir, dun sa...
Yes, Mar.
Dun sa sa learning task ulit, nakita ko learning outcome. So, iniisip ko yun. So, it is immediate outcome na gawin namin. Hindi naman futuristic, di ba? Yung ganun.
Yes.
Immediate outcome sa loob ng klase, parang ganun.
Yes.
Okay.
That's right. Okay, about the others, any clarification? Si Daryl pala, magkasiluwang pala kami ng noo ni Daryl. Magkasiluwang pala tayo ng noo, Daryl. Okay. Any more question? Razlyn, okay ka lang? So, kaya bang gawin yung task? Hanggang hanggang Saturday yun, ha? Hanggang Friday pa, hanggang Saturday. Then I have to check your task, yung sa differentiating big concepts and your worksheet. Okay, prior to your first quiz on Monday next week. Okay? So I cannot give you the quiz unless I'll check all the assessments. Any questions? So ibig sabihin, I will expect for a perfect score in the activity. No one's asking a question.
Sir, ano po yung coverage ng quiz?
Yung outcomes-based education, lesson 1. Please take note that you have to be very serious in doing the activities because ito yung tinatawag natin na real essence of assessment. Everything that you do is in preparation for the quiz. So ibig sabihin, kapag mag-review kayo sa klase ko, aralin niyo ulit yung mga ginawa niyo ng mga previous activities. Even your learning takeaway kasi certainly lalabas yan sa quiz. Because the activities prior to the quiz are preparation. Okay, are good preparation for you to earn good grades in the quiz. Because quiz is a summative exam. It's a summative assessment. Yung mga activities ninyo, these are formative assessment to prepare you, to form you towards a good score or earning a good score for the summative assessment. Okay, so ganun mag-review sa klase ko ha. Lahat ng gagawin ninyo ay makakatulong para sa mga susunod na activity. Kaya kung mapansin ninyo, yung differentiating big concepts ninyo, makakatulong yan para magawa ninyo yung worksheet na pinakita ko kanina. Okay? Yung worksheet na gagawin ninyo, makakatulong yan para makuha ninyo, para magkaroon kayo ng magandang score doon sa quiz. Okay? Ang quiz naman ay multiple choice, objective test type. Okay? Okay ka lang, Dayan? Parang lalungkot ka bigla, Dayan. About Crystal. Crystal, okay ka lang, Crystal? Nasa resort ka ba, Crystal?
Sir, nasa labas po ako ng bahay.
Akala ko nasa resort ka. Okay. Yes, Jude. Any question, Jude? Mukhang ginaw na ginaw ka, Jude.
None po, sir.
Wala? Okay.
Sir, question again? Sorry.
Yes, ma'am.
Palatanong ako lagi. Lagi ko tinatanong sa mga teacher kasi pag nag-announce lang quiz, tinatanong ko lagi ito, is the quiz subjective or objective?
Is the quiz subjective or objective? Our quiz for our first quiz is objective.
Okay. Thank you.
Saglit, i-check ko. Baka mali ako. Saglit. Alam ko objective ito. Nasaan na yun? Dapat hindi ko na ipapakita sa inyo, no?
Ano po?
Yes, it's the quiz is on Monday. The quiz is in multiple choice and sentence completion. There are 5 items for sentence completion, and the other 20 items to, and the 15 items are multiple choices questions. Okay? Pero kapag ako po ay nagpapa-quiz, kahit multiple choice po siya, mag-iisip po talaga kayo. Okay, alam ni Dian yan. Diba? Tama ba ako, Dian?
Yes, sir.
More on application. Tama ba, Dian? Okay, more on application siya. Kaya maganda na, natutuwa ako at nagtatanong kayo ng mga tanong, ng mga clarifications, kasi makakatulong yan para na ay lalo yung maunawaan ang ating talakayan. Okay? Yes, if there are no more questions, then enjoy the activity. Given na ata siya. Okay, so you just have to select a pair mate, okay, for you to complete the task. Okay, so may we have then our closing prayer. And as I have said, when I ask you to do or to lead the prayer, please make use of a personal prayer. Okay, para mas taimtim yung ating mga panalangin. Hindi ko ba sinasabi na na hindi taimtim ang formulated prayer, pero syempre iba pa rin kapag yung inyong mga panalangin ay nagagaling mismo sa inyong salita at nagagaling mismo sa inyong mga puso. Okay? And because of that, may we listen to the voice of Eileen as she will be leading us to the closing prayer. Eileen?
So let's pray the Father and Lord God, thank you for this day. Thank you for the God discussion. Lord, may you bless each of us. May you help that we can this we finish. Lord, thank you, and this in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Thank you again. Please continue to attend our video conferences because this would certainly help you earn good grades in the course. And of course, I'm really happy, because there are many of you who keep asking questions, and I really love that. So continue or keep doing that. Okay? So again, thank you and have a nice night na ba? Okay, have a nice night.
Sir, last.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.